who's next? What is next? Tell us.
Well, now we dive into the Circularity Gap Report, and we have an impulse part. My pleasure now to introduce Martijn Lopes Cardozo. Martijn, he's a serial entrepreneur. You founded several companies, been active in a lot of different fields, but also now the CEO of Circle Economy, one of the organizations behind the Circularity Gap Report, and in particular behind the Circularity Gap Report Munich. First of all, Martijn, we're going to learn from you on the global perspective, right? We talked about that 7%, and then you hand over to your teammate, Jordi. Jordi will tell us more about what's happening in Munich. What are the findings there? Everybody's curious about that. So if you guys are ready, we're ready. Warm welcome, big applause on stage. Martijn Lopes Cardozo, good to have you here.
So yesterday we had a great little pre-event at BMW Foundation, and one of the ladies asked me, "Now you have done, this great analysis on Circularity Gap Report in Munich, but is it really going to happen, or is it just going to be another report?" And maybe I had too many wines, I don't know, but I think I gave a really bad answer, and I've been thinking about this question for a good portion of the night, so that's why I'm a little tired. And I want to give a better answer to you now, before I start the piece on the world. And I think my answer would be 3 parts. The first answer will be, and it will become quite obvious when Jordi has done his piece of the presentation, is we have to. The second piece of the answer, and I think there were some great interventions this morning, is also we want to. Because if you think about a world that is much more circular, there are more meaningful jobs, it will be greener, there's a lot of opportunity as well on the innovative side. So it's something to aspire. And the final portion of that question is, yes, we can, to quote Obama. Because if I think, and we've worked with about 60 cities across the whole world, if I think about one city and the assets that Munich has to actually do this, I think Munich is extremely well positioned. It's prosperous, it is very rigorous in the way it approaches things, it's innovative. We heard about 2 to 3 billion euros in venture capital each year that it attracts. And I think in terms of mindset, I recognize a lot of mindset that I also recognize from my native Amsterdam. And yes, we've been on that road a bit longer in the Netherlands, but in conversations I recognize a few things very similar. So, hopefully that's a better answer, and I feel a bit less guilty now, so let's dive right in. Let's talk about the world. So 5 years ago, we said we really have to anchor circular economy a bit more in facts. And the reason I say that is there's various perspectives on what is a circularity, but also very much different perspectives on how you actually should measure and think about it, moving all the way from waste and recycling to circular economy is a new world religion. So what we did is said, okay, let's look at the whole world. Almost all materials stay on the world. What's actually happening? What's flowing through? And what we found is that we're using over 100 billion tons of materials. Think about that for a second, 100 billion tons of materials. And we have used more materials in the last 10 years than the complete century before. And if we keep the current path, it's going to double again by 2060. And that, of course, has a massive implication, as Matthias mentioned this morning, on climate, on actually all the planetary boundaries, and we're now overshooting already 6. So what did we do? We basically mapped, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, what's happening with the complete flow of all the materials, the impact on climate, but also the strategies that you can apply. And what we found is that by applying 4 different strategies, and I'll get to that in a moment, and you map that on the key societal needs, housing, mobility, food, and consumables, you basically get this solution vortex. And the size is basically the amount of climate change reductions you can achieve. And the colors are the different categories. So I invite you all to read the report. The blue is the housing, the green is the food and agri, red is mobility, and the other ones are the consumables. So what are those strategies? There's basically 4. So what you need to do is use less materials, slow down the metabolism, use them longer, use cleaner materials and cleaner inputs, so that includes renewable energy. And the 4th one is, of course, cycle at the end, but there's a reason why that is last. And if you apply these 4 strategies on those 4 key systems, you have about 80 to 90% of the solution. All right, and if you do that, then actually we can stay within the planetary boundaries, because material use and the emissions linked with material use are such a significant portion of staying within the climate boundaries. All right, so today we're going to talk about cities, and more specifically Munich. And why does that matter? Because cities are such a concentrated place, 3% of the Earth's surface, 50% of the population is actually going to rise to 60, 70% in the next 20, 30 years. A lot of GDP, a lot of energy use, and almost 70% of the resource use. And a lot of those actually resources are being imported in the city. They're embedded in the products we use every day. All right, the good news is cities are also places to get things done. And I think we heard about Susanne talking about, inspire, enable, and act. That's exactly what needs to happen. And the fact that we're all in the room and creating this movement, and we have, key partners on board, is going to make all the difference. So, great honor to introduce my colleague Jordi, who will talk a bit more, followed by a panel with some of the visionaries on circularity in cities. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Martijn. And what an amazing energy, what a cool place. Congratulations, Circular Republic, for this. I think I'm going to be moving more than Martijn while I'm speaking. And I must start with saying that I'm extremely honored and proud of being presenting the first Circularity Gap Report for a city, the Circularity Gap Report for Munich. And I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the foundation of what's going to happen in the coming years in Munich, with many of you involved in this journey. And I also want to, of course, thanks again to Circular Republic for igniting this and all the partners that have been involved. Because this is the first step. Because the first step is knowing where you currently stand, right, as a city, understanding where I am. And we have tried to answer 4 very concrete questions in this work. What is the current baseline of circularity in Munich? What urban systems are key to tackle first? What are the key levers and interventions to accelerate the transition? And what is the potential impact that can be achieved through circularity? And after we have answered these questions, and a very key point and principle we have used in all this journey together with the team is that circular economy is a means to an end, right? It's a means to achieve greater environmental impacts. So it really connects to many other agendas like climate, biodiversity. So it's really a tool, it's a solution that can bring us to a more prosperous future. And I will just summarize this in 3 points. Because circular economy is about systemic change. It's maximize quality of life, decreasing overall environmental impacts. it's also about identifying the root cause. In this work, we really tried hard to understand what's the challenge, what's the root cause of this challenge. And finally, looking at the blind spot, consumption. In many occasions throughout the years, circular economy has been very much about, end of pipe and a bit short-sighted. So we are really pushing for the blind spot, which is consumption. But then you are all wondering, as well as I was a year back, where does Munich currently stand? So I will just guide you through this in the coming minutes. And the first fact that we need to look, as I was saying, right, consumption is the key point to look at, is material footprint per capita. As many of you probably know, the global sustainable level is said to be around 8 tons per capita per year. So let's look at how this looks in some perspective. The world is estimated to be at around 12 tons per capita. EU 27, 18 tons per capita. Germany, 21 tons per capita. Denmark, around 25 tons per capita. And Munich at 32 tons per capita. So we need to take this with perspective because different estimations use different methodologies. So it's not about the figure itself, but it's more about the proportions. And as I was saying, the importance about consumption, and in this case, material footprint, how many materials are needed to fuel consumption in Munich. And this picture will look similar in other European cities, because cities, as Martijn also said, are hotspots of prosperity, but also hotspots of consumption. So this is a reality we need to face. Another reality about consumption is that local impact has global impact. And this is what we also saw in this report. And many cities are going in this direction. And if you just look at the figures, from this material footprint, over 50% is coming from outside Germany, from the rest of Europe or rest of the world, and 48% from Germany, so domestically extracted. So what is being consumed in Munich has an impact outside the city. Wow, this is very complex. It's fascinating to me. This is the urban metabolism of the city of Munich. It looks complex, but also beautiful in a way, right? And I do think that it really tells you something about the city. You go in a cafe or you are in this industrial area. Everything tells you something about a city, and this is just another aspect of Munich. And this is its urban metabolism. It tells you a story about the city. And I will guide you through it from left to right, okay? On the left side, we have the inputs. So what's coming in the city, what resources are coming in. You can see how half of it is imported, and about the other half is domestically extracted. Here we are looking at groups of products, biomass, fossil fuels, ores, and minerals. If you would break it down into 100 products, it would be impossible to understand. So then if we move further to the right, about half of it is being exported outside Germany, outside Munich, sorry. And then the other half is being consumed in the city. There are different activities, services, products, etc., in order to fulfill your societal needs, right? Many of you probably live in Munich, and we have a list of societal needs. Martijn was speaking to some of them. And this is fueling the consumption in Munich, all these resources that are being used. And then at the very right, you can see how the total material consumption of Munich is 48 million tons per year, with data from 2019. And after this consumption, of course, there's output. There is waste being generated, which is around 40% of the total. And then there is 60% which is added to the stock. In a building, it's your car, whatever stays in the stock. And then on the wasted part, you can see emissions, and then the materials that become waste, so a wasted resource, that some of it is cycled back into the system. 1.2 million tons. So, what do we get out of this? First, high volumes of material extraction, particularly minerals and fossil fuels. Imports, they are huge. High levels of material consumption to fulfill the societal needs. There's limited material cycling, which in a sense is normal because the input is huge. So there's a limited potential to make up for that input. And finally, high net additions to stock, which means that Munich is alive, it's growing, and there's an urban development that is happening. So let's look into the societal needs in a bit more detail. So how is the 48 million tons spread across the different needs that all of us have? Housing, 30% of the total. Manufactured goods, 24%. Mobility, 15%. Public and commercial services, 11%. Nutrition, 10%. And healthcare and education, 7%. And communication, 3%. Most of it is not, mind-blowing, right? Housing, all cities are constructing, and this is a huge activity. You can see it just across the window. Mobility, same thing. Services, again, the same thing. Nutrition, we just had lunch now. It's something we need to live in a city, in a livable city. Manufacturing, I would say, is something that is probably stands out in Munich, being a more industrialized area compared to other areas in Europe and globally. So, to summarize, Munich, high material footprint, which is driving, of course, the demand, but of course, it also relates to the carbon footprint, the emissions that are associated with that consumption. Low consumption of secondary materials, so the cycling is limited because of the high consumption. And finally, high impact abroad. Local impact, local consumption, global impact. Right. But as Martijn also pointed, during this year, we have also seen that using these insights, there's a huge potential to embrace circularity in Munich. Huge. By applying these strategies, right? And moreover, in a city, not Munich, in any city where consumption is one of the main drivers of the environmental impacts. And it's super important to focus on narrowing and slowing, also on regeneration. And then, of course, cycling is important, but not the only solution. And then, by looking at these different strategies, we then started mapping this to the different systems in the city. What are the interventions that can have the biggest impact in which sectors, in which systems? The first one, to build a circular built environment. Second one, shifting to a circular food system. The third one, advancing circular manufacturing. I mean, I've seen this just in the different labs right next to this door. Promoting circular lifestyle. Again, consumption. How do we tackle this? And then redesigning mobility. And what can be the impact of implementing this? In the report, you can see more detail on the different interventions under each of them. I can tell you, it's massive. We would go from these 48 million tons of material footprint to 28 million tons of material footprint. These are a reduction of 43% of Munich's material footprint. It's massive. And it's important to say that this would only entail what Munich would do. The stakeholders, you, would do in Munich, but this impact could be larger if other German cities would join the transition, if the national government would join the same direction, if other European cities join, because as I said, local impact, global impact, and this builds synergies. And this is only looking at Munich itself. So the impact could be larger. And of course, in the report we also talk about this, is the co-benefits of it, the business opportunities around it, and the new employment that can be created, which is also extremely crucial. And Munich has the means to embrace the circular economy and be a front runner. You already are, just by embracing Circularity Gap Report and really putting it here on stage. First, I think because CGR Munich, Circularity Gap Report Munich, is addressing the complexity of measuring circularity in cities. Arjan will talk about this about Amsterdam. And you speak to any city, everyone is struggling. It's normal. But facing it, it's already being a leader and already being a front runner. You possess high innovation, livability standards, and economic capabilities. So you have the ingredients that are needed to really push strong for this. And it is already putting the energy on the right enablers. Measuring progress, we are seeing this. Infrastructure, regulation, and collaboration, right? This is why we are here today. So I think, that with all the energy I got today from this session and what we saw in this, fun journey, energizing journey with our colleagues, there's so much that can be done and that is already happening, that I really feel that this is just the first step and the start of the circularity journey in Munich. And I really hope that all of you will jump on this journey together with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jordi, for sharing the insights into the report. I'll soon see you here back on the stage for our panel discussion. Now a little bit time for you to work again. You know how it works. Menti, get out your phones, because I have another question that also will be important impulse for our next session. So here we go. Just scan it again or go straight to Menti, because what we would like to hear from you now, what are the biggest game changers on the way towards the transformation to a circular economy? Looks like you like the question already. Here's the question again. Word cloud coming up. And I'm curious to see, waiting for your responses. Everybody was very focused, working. Politics mindset again. That's our old friend. The mindset change. So that will be a question for the panelists. How do we make that happen? Already keep that in mind. Politics awareness. I mean, awareness is definitely something we talked about in the session with Focus Online as well. Like, how do we bring more awareness? How do we bring more media time? How do we bring more time for all these topics? I think super important. Collaboration plays an important part. Money and incentives I see here. Design for longevity, so the design part, designing products in a different way. A lot more answers coming in, so I'll keep that for a minute, and then we'll see what we make out of this in our panel discussion now. So now, time to dive deeper into the results also of the report. And my big pleasure, first of all, to introduce our speakers. Arjan Hassing, you're Circular Innovation Strategist for the City of Amsterdam. You do a lot of many different things also in the field of circular economy. You're the initiator behind CircuLaw. That's an open source platform for legal advice. I think something, have you seen legal somewhere on here?
Yeah, I'm happy to see regulations as well.
The regulations part. Speaking about regulations, first of all, warm welcome and great to have you here. Your applause. Speaking about regulations, Hans-Christian Eberl from the European Commission, you are team leader for circular economy in the DG, Directorate General Research and Innovation. Chemical engineer by training, so you bring that expertise in here as well. Warm welcome, good to have you on board with us here. Susanne Kadner.
And I deny any responsibility for legislation because that's DG Environment, DG Grow, that's the audit. we are the people who fund projects, you know, so there's lots of money in this, and we are responsible for Horizon Europe, Circular Cities and Regions Initiative. So we are the good guys.
So, quick question to the audience, who wants money? Not too many, right? I don't know if there's something wrong about the question. Susanne, do you want more money for your circular economy activities? Always more money. I mean, we know you, of course, by now, co-founder of Circular Republic. Welcome back on stage. And Jordi, you just presented all the results. Last but not least, everybody take a seat. Good to know that you bring the money and the regulations, but maybe let's jump into, we heard now some of the results, of course, on the global level. We know this figure of the 7%. We now have the results from Munich. First question to all of you, is there something that's surprising? Maybe Arjan, you want to go first?
Yeah, it's very interesting to see. And first of all, Munich, congratulations. Don't know from the city of people are here, but anyhow, anyone who's here, congratulations with these results. I think it all starts with insights, and for us, these first three insight reports in Amsterdam have also been the start, as Jordi mentioned, of a whole new process of going circular with Amsterdam. We're not there yet, but it's been very interesting to see, to look at this data from another city. Because of course, Amsterdam is very much a service-oriented city, and we are a transit city, so about 3/4 of all the materials that flow into Amsterdam also flow out of Amsterdam again. So we have a whole different set of questions compared to a city like Munich that is very material intensive, that has a lot of manufacturing, and where also a lot of raw materials come out of the country, out of Germany or out of the region. So you have very different and also very interesting new set of questions and new challenges also that can be addressed by the right policy, regulation, facilitation by the city, I think.
So first of all, Susanne, I was happy that he didn't say congratulations on the 32 tons, because that's not a good thing, right? We were pretty much in the lead. Was there anything specific that was surprising for you also when the results came out?
It's just what you asked me, right? So what was the surprise? I mean, I was like, well, the 32 tons for sure. Of course, you know, I am from Munich. You know what Munich is, you know, we are a wealthy city. We are a manufacturing hotspot, so you do expect this. But then, yeah, when I saw the 32 tons, that definitely took me by surprise. It had the effect that I calculated my personal material footprint. I can only invite everyone to do it. It's sobering. I thought I'm aware. I, you know, pull a lot of these levers, and I still realized if it's not enough. And that then brought me to the question, what is the role of the city? Providing the infrastructure that I can get better, and which other levers do I have personally to improve? So,
Yeah, totally interesting, because that also links a little bit back to one of our first questions that we had in the poll, right? How circular are you? And some answered probably for the organization, for you personally. I did something in between. We are not really towards 8, 9, and 10, but maybe closer to 2, 3, and 4. But Hans Christian, then also same question to you. What was surprising for you in all these results?
Well, after 15 years in Brussels, I'm not surprised by any figures anymore. Not even the 32 tons after all the reports that I had to monitor and that to some extent have my name on it. But what I would love to know is what the 32 tons really mean. Is that the material that's moved in 1 year because of my mere existence? So that's an average. So that there's some, I wouldn't call it a problem, but there are some issues, of course, with these figures. And maybe that's something we can talk about. What was to some extent surprising is that mobility only comes in 3rd place. I would have assumed that this is in 2nd place. Mm-hmm. But yes, it echoes very much what I expected, and it's good that we have figures for this now, in this detail for the first time. Scrutinized figures. Thank you for that.
So, surprise on the absolute numbers, surprise on mobility. Jordi, you've been working, of course, now for quite some time on this report. Do you still see surprises when you look back as when you started? Is there something that turned out differently than you expected?
Well, I think now I'm recovering my voice. Yeah, I mean, I think the fact of looking at the footprint already is, looking at sustainability in a city in a different way, right? Because it's scratching the surface of what's actually happening in a city and really looking at, what's beyond this and what's the impact of the city when you're looking at global value chains, right? Supply chains that actually are maybe coming from South America, China, and other European countries. So I think this report and this work has really unpacked this impact into, the footprint, where is actually the impact happening beyond Munich borders. And I think this is, as Susanne said, eye-opening. And I think this was quite a big, it's the first Circularity Gap report, so it's the first city to really, open to these facts that they need to face.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in Hans Christian, please, if you want.
Just a talk reaction. What I really like is that you're honest about boundaries, and that you're completely honest about impacts that you export, and that is something that we didn't do in the past, and that is something that we're also learning at the Commission and that we're addressing more and more. But I see that this in old reports, that's a huge problem, and we need to address that, because that's a complete lie. We are living that lie.
I think also in Amsterdam, we have over the last few years, we've been doing our calculations, and we also have more insight in our urban metabolism and the Scope 3 emissions. And the first time we saw this number, it was also about 80% being Scope 3 emissions. In Amsterdam, we were very surprised, and it totally changed also the narrative over the last few years. And it also raises entirely new questions of what exactly are we responsible for as a city when you look at these 80%. And of course, as Amsterdam, we do feel responsible. We are below sea level, and we will be below sea level even more in the future, and we can raise our dikes, but we're a delta, so the rivers will keep on flowing in. So we will become more and more of a bathtub. So it is super important for us to address this, and we don't have all the answers yet, but having insights in these Scope 3 emissions creates a whole new narrative and new things to think about for our politicians as well, for the board.
Yeah, I can only thank you for making this point so early in the discussion, Arjan, because I think this is super important to address. I have a background in climate, you know, I've worked there for 10 years, and 6-7 years ago I started on circular economy, and at the moment still these discussions, there's a huge gap. We've got climate strategies on the local level, on the national level, international agreements for that, but we have nothing like that on the material side. And through this exercise, you can bring the material and the climate stories together, because of course they both need to be regulated in one way or another. And I think for this the report is so helpful as well, to really bring it together and know that you have to address it jointly.
Yes, I fully agree, and I would like to mention that in the case of Amsterdam, because we have worked with them for quite a while, they use the donut economics framework. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's also a very nice way to understand these local global impacts in a framework that I believe it's really accessible, and that really is also very eye-opening. And Amsterdam has really developed a lot of their work on circularity based on this framework that is looking at global, local, social and environmental impacts, which I find extremely interesting.
What I like already that you made this comparison now to other cities, Arjan. This is how you started comparing it to Amsterdam, saying it has different characteristics, more on service, not so much on manufacturing. So we're early on in the beginning gathering data at the city level, right? This is the first report here. You've done some experiences. Can we nevertheless already derive some sort of patterns that might be applicable to other cities as well? Because also not every city will be able to do this. Jordi, I can imagine it's quite extensive work, a lot of resources that need to go in there. So can we probably already derive some findings, or other way around, also what's the status quo in some other of the big cities all over Europe?
Well, I think, as you said, it's the first Circularity Gap report. So now we want to really start benchmarking, you know, what we see in Munich in other areas. But as I was mentioning, I mean, the low-hanging fruits in European cities are not going to be very different. Mm-hmm. The built environment, mobility, food, these are systems that are always going to be extremely important. So I think, in that sense, those patterns, you know, are really similar. And then you will always find particularities to different cities. No, manufacturing in Amsterdam. I'm from Barcelona, so we have a big peri-urban you know, agricultural area that feeds the city. So that's, again, this will make the results for nutrition quite different, because we have a very local growth of this resource, and we are not importing it that much. So, you know, but I do think that the low-hanging fruits will be quite similar. And then you will need to see what are the particularities of each city to really tailor,
Yeah, and to add on that, I think a commonality in many of the cities we see in Europe and outside is that well, we are 10 or 15 years behind in the transition when you compare it to the energy transition. So it's a very young transition. And I think everywhere you see still a lot of experimentation. Cities trying to get their head around their role and their position in the transition. How can they accelerate? What is expected from them? How to relate to front runners and to all SME companies and industries that have to make this transition. But what I also see is that over the last years there have been more and more approaches and methods on how to actually start with this. And that's quite a big difference compared to 5 years ago. We have more data, and that's a big difference as well. So if we connect the data, we get to insights like more overall insights like this. And what I think, what I hope will happen, also still in Amsterdam, we have to take a big step there, is that as urban governments, we actually start giving more direction anytime soon, so that we are clear in the coming years what the targets are, how we want to get there, what kind of norms we are planning to give to the market, to demand from the market, for example, in construction, so that also the market is able to move there, and that we also facilitate them, of course, or support them financially, but that we actually give more direction, and that we don't, as cities, stay too long in a state of experimentation, because then I'm afraid it's just going to take too long, also looking at the whole climate crisis.
And maybe, Hans-Christian, also your perspective, the European perspective. So now we talked about Amsterdam, Munich, Barcelona a little bit. I like the difference, Jordi, that you said maybe mobility is there a little bit stronger than in Munich. How do you perceive circular economy overall in Europe? Is that quite distinct, quite diverse in terms of progress? Are we all making some good steps?
Let's start with the need. I think there's a need in all over Europe. And diversity is not an issue there. I think there are some, in your study, in your report, there's some messages of general value and generic validity. And then in the details, there's differences, but I don't see that as a problem. What I would love to see is a mapping that for cities we have not only size and say money available for capacity for circular economy interventions, that we also see what we have in staff, what's the level of industrialization, what's the density, what's the travel distances from home to work in cities, that we have sort of a catalog, because I think this will influence intervention measures. And I think science-wise we are not there yet. So this is something that could be improved. And I totally love radar charts. I think you had one in one of your presentations. I love radar charts because I don't believe in one overall indicator that says, well, your city is that % circular. I mean, the downside of this is that you have a message that people will use against you because maybe they don't like the figure, they just divide it by the money invested, then it's even lower. And maybe you have massive achievements in one area, and one city is better in transport, one city is better in renewable energy. So I would love to see that, and like a staff profile that you say, okay, this is already great, there's room for improvement, there are others that are better, and then you can compare, and you say, and maybe there I can learn. I don't know whether the same measures are feasible that maybe will work in Munich. You can do the same things in Berlin. I mean, I do not want to diss Berlin, but I think they have less money available for interventions. So, but I'm drifting away from your question. You wanted to ask about the EU level. Well, we are hosting a big initiative. We have invested 250 million so far for the circular cities and regions since 2020, actually spending money since 2021. So that is quite a budget. And there you see the full diversity. But you also see that you need to take measures, whether it's in, what was it, Castile-Leon or Munich or southern Italy. I mean, the problems are different ones. In southern Italy, you have massive health impacts due to environmental pollution from non-existing waste management. So you need direct intervention measures. But in Spain, Portugal, you have the old textile and leather industry that is struggling, that you need to reform. So there it's about saving jobs. These are different problems, but I mean, circular economy can help in all these problems, whether it's pollution, whether it's jobs, whether it's overall CO2 emissions. Yeah, it just came to my mind this Bavarian word, the eierlegende Wollmilchsau. That's this fairy tale animal. I mean, not really fairy tale because it's a bit scary. But
sorry,
the one thing
you can't translate it.
No, that's the one animal that delivers, that provides what, eggs,
one size
milk,
fits all
wool,
thing.
and probably also meat at the end. So but yes, I think circular economy can provide significant tangible change in all these areas. And what I saw out there, I wanted to mention that I'm a bit hijacking the discussion now. these maker spaces, the labs, I mean, this is brilliant. In circular economy, you have these end-of-pipe waste management, high-tech things, you have the circularity hubs, and we must not forget that cities also have industry, that cities have manufacturing, that cities not just citizens on a stroll, it's big business. It's not just in rural areas, and I think Munich is a perfect example for that. But you not only have high-tech and you not only have end-of-pipe waste management, you also have these grassroots movements that often are not covered by initiatives, neither by R&I funding nor by accounting. And they have a huge social and societal impact. And they are sometimes very low-key and low-tech, but what I like here is that this is a combination, because they are putting high-tech into grassroots initiatives. They are connecting something that looks completely disparate but isn't. So that's a new way of initiating projects. So there's a space for this too.
Maybe I'll jump into one of the first thoughts, because it's still about that data gathering, right? Recognizing patterns. You mentioned the catalog. That's a nice idea. There's a lot of characteristics of how we can classify cities. I mean, income could be one to add, because we heard it also in your findings. Munich, wealthy city. There might be a link, hypotheses, right? So I'm a little bit more careful. Income, demographics, educational levels. So that would be nice to kind of start mapping cities. Susanne, that's another big task, right? We want to aim. Do you see that on your plate already? I want to give you some homework.
Why are you looking at me now? No, of course, sort of, I like this idea of the catalog, because I can totally see this argument. Cities are so diverse, the nationalities, the different levels of income. You've just named it. And then having a platform like the CCRI, where you can come together, and for me, it resonates a lot, this sort of joint learning and the exchange, because, yeah, one city might be good in the mobility sector, one might be better in the construction. We have in both areas, obviously, problems here in Munich. How can we exchange on this European level and learn from each other? Specifically, looking at different KPIs who show me, we got them now for Munich. Some cities don't have them yet, and get into the exchange. So I like that a lot. Mm-hmm. I have to think about the role that Circular Public is going to play, but...
Somebody has to take over the task. Let's ask for some volunteers in the audience. Not sure about that. No, but I think this will be really interesting, because Arjan, that was also one of your first points, like where you said, congratulations, you have now insights, right? So we identified areas. But now the big question is, like, what are then really the interventions? And maybe let's look into some of the areas. Built environment was number one here for Munich, manufacturing, the mobility, food. So, and as you all said, these areas will be similar across cities. Maybe the one will be on number 2, the other one will be on number 4. Let's start with built environment. What are the interventions then now that we really transform the built environment?
Yeah, if I may, I mean, and I'm bringing it back to Amsterdam, because I live there as well, so it's a case that I know very well. But I mean, the Puma project, right, on urban mining, I mean, that happened already quite a few years back, maybe 7 years back or something. And this, as we were showing in the results, you need to slow, right? You need to make a better and more efficient use of the resources that you already have in the system, so that the footprint can go down, and you're just making a better use of what you already have. And this urban mining exercise is just really understanding, what are the metals and the different materials already embedded in our built environment, and how new constructions can benefit from them. And I do find this, extremely logical, difficult to do, but, there's the urban mining element, I think it's growing a lot. And Amsterdam, I think, was pioneering that a few years back. And our organization is also involved, and I'm sure that many cities are looking at that. And I think that's probably a very good first start.
Maybe I'll quote you on that one. Very logical, but difficult to do. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the built environment. It is logical, but very, very difficult to do. Even more difficult than other fields. Hypotheses again. Would you agree, disagree, Arjan?
For a city, I would disagree, because I think the built environment is the area where we have most influence as city. So the most concrete regulations are actually in this value chain that we have. So Also, we do CircuLaw. That's a platform for regulation for circular economy. It's initiated by the city of Amsterdam and different other partners and universities. And we actually scrape the laws and then look like, okay, what kind of legal instruments do cities and provinces have at their disposal to actually stimulate the circular transition in their cities or regions. And we found that actually most instruments can be found in this value chain. So they are put quite low in the legislative system at cities or provinces. So I think a good next step from here, from the insights that we have here, also in construction, is to look at the 5 phases in the value chain. So from the extraction of materials to the design, to the production, to the use, to the the harvesting phase, and actually look very systematically like, okay, what kind of interventions, legal interventions, but also other interventions do we have as a city in these different phases. And also we may find out then that new innovations are required, or we don't have solutions yet, like for example, clean alternatives for isolation or some kind of material that you need. And then you can also, as a city, work together with your innovation ecosystems in a more directed way and really know better what you want to ask from the market, so that innovators, companies also know better, like, oh, okay, this is what is needed in this transition. So we can really focus on that in the development of new materials or applications, for example. So yeah, we are also now working, trying to look at the different, also with manufacturing, you could just, it gives a nice overview also to simplify things, to put it in these different value chain phases and look from there like, okay, what can we do as a city? Or where do we need to collaborate, for example, with the national government as well.
When you now add on, maybe to add on, you say we have the instruments, but why do we still then have the big gaps? Any idea, any thoughts on this? Because why is built environment still that massive contributor so far in terms of material footprint?
No,
Shared
I'm
responsibility.
not, yeah, exactly. I'm absolutely no expert in buildings, but what I've learned from sort of like little bit tapping into this sector, it's very complex, you know, looking at the whole, if you think about new to build environments, you know, it's very complex supply chains. It's a very regulated sector, you know, where it's difficult to get innovation in. So this is, I'm just really repeating from what I've learned. But it's also the sector, like you say, with the biggest impact. And just sort of going back to the report as well, you know, which quoted we have a reduction potential here of 18%. You know, this is massive, and a lot of this is what we need to think about in the climate context anyway. So if a city has set up a sort of climate strategy, it's the efficiency aspect. You know, it's the isolation of the buildings, it's smart metering. These are all strategies. I can tell you they were already written in the 5th assessment report where I was part of UNFCCC. You know, this is all not new. What sort of comes new in is sort of the material side of things, the gray energy. Don't tear the buildings down, you know, and not only if they're sort of historically protected, but if there are buildings which don't seem to be modern or adequate, think about maintaining them, renovating them in a way, but keep the gray energy that was used for producing them standing there and not wasted. And the intensification of the use, the sharing concept in buildings, you know, and it's ownership questions as well. Of course, I don't know which role a city can play here, but I think these are the aspects that come new into the discussion when you combine the climate and the material perspective.
Yeah, and the role of cities, but then of course also on the national level, but European Union level. Hans-Christian, what can be the big drivers in this field then? It's fragmented, it's complicated, highly regulated somehow as well, complicated from a material point of view. How can we really tap into this huge potential?
Looking at results from R&I, I don't think it's that complicated. But the thing is, we can take technical innovation to a certain TRL, meaning a readiness for the market. We can take it to TRL 8, that is now technical lingo, but that means we cannot provide something that's really ready for the market. We can try and test, but we cannot really found an enterprise and sell things. That's not our role. What I see, there's in Horizon 2020 and now in Horizon Europe, there's always been projects using at a large scale even, for example, you mentioned insulation materials, bio-based insulation materials, secondary materials, all sorts of secondary materials, with a full analysis of the life cycle. So the data is there, the material is there, but I mean, research and innovation cannot make this feasible. If then manufacturers have no pressure to use that material, secondary or bio-based, in any case, more sustainable material, in construction, then it will always remain like this, and we will spend money on research, and it will lead us nowhere. So the change there has to come from EU policy, traditional regulatory policy, also from other policy. There has to be procurement. There has to be the bloody German and Austrian Bauordnung that has to change the rules for construction. And then we are there. I think science is ready. And then it's just snapping fingers and we have the materials there. But that is just one aspect. If we talk about the loop, then this is about closing the loop. We also need to talk about slowing down the loop. And luckily in the Green Deal we are talking about the renovation wave. But if I look at history and all the greenwashing by industry, in the past we created a mindset that basically says it's better if we replace the old bad products, we buy new ones, better cars, better washing machines, we build new houses, because the old ones are not environmentally friendly. If you do a proper life cycle assessment, you will find out in 90% it's better if you would have kept the old washing machine. Of course, industry wouldn't want to hear that, but I think there's a change. That is now about slowing down the loop. Okay, there's a third aspect that is narrowing the loop. There's also a mindset issue, because it's like a life upgrade if you move from an apartment to a better apartment somewhere central in a chic district, and then you have your townhouse, 2 walls, and then you have your house with a garden, and your footprint is increasing exponentially. That's something that I don't know how to change that, but I think the big issue there is awareness and the mindset. But I don't want to introduce a communist doctrine and say people are not allowed to build houses anymore. But
maybe we pick up the mindset part as well, but Susanne, you wanted to jump in?
No, because public procurement is something I wanted to pass on to you immediately. Because it's such a big lever, right?
Yeah, it's and I also really agree with Hans Christian on the interplay between legislation, regulation, and innovation. It's like it's already scientifically been proven that this interplay is crucial. It drives legislation, drives innovation, well, before I go into your question, I think a nice example in Amsterdam as well is we have the festival sector, like dance festivals. It's quite big. We have a lot of very different festivals. And like 5 years ago, we started implementing new legislation that said, like, okay, in a few years, you are not allowed to use diesel engines anymore at your festival terrain. So you have a few years to work. It was like progressive legislation. You have a few years to work towards that. And what you saw that this is also a super innovative sector. So within a few years, a completely new system of batteries, hardware and software, because it's quite difficult on festivals with high peaks to get the whole software system right as well. So within a few years, a whole new system for powering these big stages was invented. And the great thing was that now we are starting to use these applications for emission-free construction sites in Amsterdam. So it's cross-pollinating to another sector. So actually, the festival sector, they weren't angry at us because we were applying regulations, but they were happy that we were clear on where we were moving as a city and what we were expecting from them in the future. So they felt safe to invest. And I think this is a really nice example of something, of a principle or an interplay that we could apply a lot more also in circularity. And also in procurement, I think procurement can have exactly the same effect, especially if you're clear about what you are expecting in the future in a progressive manner. And I think also to give an answer to your question, like the big problem and why it doesn't go fast enough is that within a city like Amsterdam, we have 19,000 civil servants. It's huge, it's a village. So it's really a matter also of organizational change and cultural change. And because it's very hard with just a small team of circular experts, of sustainable experts, to influence and to change the mindset of all these civil servants and to make them aware of the fact that they are all in different positions where they can start procuring in a more sustainable, circular way. So this is, I think, the biggest challenge also is within organizations, within government organizations, where you have to take a lot of people along in this thinking. It's hundreds of thousands of civil servants who actually have to start applying these new criteria, sustainable criteria. So yeah.
And maybe there to make the link also to one of the earlier sessions when we had the session here with BMW, same story, right? We were talking about the transformation of a company with 150,000 employees. How do you make sure you get them on board? Because in the end, they will drive that. So when we talk about governments, cities, municipalities, you have the civil servants, quite a lot of people you need to also then influence.
Yeah. And if I may, like when we talk about built environment, but we can jump into any other system, the city has a responsibility, but also the private sector. And the mindset shift needs to happen in the civil servants, but also in the sector. Like the construction sector is extremely traditional as well. So that's also a fact. And we saw that in Norway in a project we did in a region, Kongsvinger in the east, where they were being very progressive there for some reason. It's only a matter of the people that are involved. And they started pushing very hard, and we started really seeing what were the bottlenecks. And a lot of it was related to regulation. How was reuse being hampered by regulation at the national level, etc. And change happened there. And they built a circular house, in that region, something that it couldn't, a whole circular house, really using demolished materials from a farm and really building a whole new building made of those materials. So that's one thing. And then I do sense that, the solutions are there. It's all there. It's just a matter of, how can we make it work? And also looking at, DGRTD with the Circular Cities and Regions initiative. I mean, a lot of money is flowing into the different sectors and into cities. So funding is also available. And what I experience is that many times there's a bit of a gap between the funding, the cities, the innovators. So, and probably this is why Circular Republic is doing such a good work on bringing all these people together in this space and trying to push hard for it. Because in these ecosystems, things actually start happening. Because I do think solutions are there, funding is there, money is there. It's just a matter of how do we bring all of this together.
I'm still surprised about the funding and monies there. We've heard that twice. I'm not sure if everybody agrees in the audience, because that's still always a big topic, usually, that we need more money, more resources in order to make something happen. Maybe there at this point also open up to the audience. If you have questions, also please raise your hand and we'll integrate them in the discussion. So think about some good questions. But maybe before we do that and give you all some time to think about, when we talk about the regulation, you mentioned there needs to be pressure on companies, pressure on different stakeholders. You gave a good example where you give freedom and planning security for a longer time. Can there be too much pressure on regulation? Because that might lead to fear, frustration. How do we find the sweet spot of regulation? It's not an easy thing, because when you talk to businesses, they usually don't like regulation, very general. Susanne, what's your experience there also at different levels? I mean, we see now activities happening at the municipality level, city level, national level in Germany, European Union level. How do all these things go hand in hand then?
Well, I think regulation in the context of providing a level playing field, as it's always said, is super helpful. And we've just talked about the aspects, how can regulation help to push innovation? And what we've seen on the national level, as you're talking about quota of recyclates in certain products, it's coming from the European Commission, of course. We have an Eco-Design Directive, which has been turned into a regulation. We got the battery regulation, and there we see how regulation is pushing for this change, is acting as a game changer, to go back to the wording that you've just used. So, and thinking about that, how this can push innovation, how you can now, because you're forced to think about it, try to think about doing things differently, and try to apply this, of course, to the regional and to municipality level as well. And there are lots of little interventions, it's Reparaturbonus, repair bonus, something like that. Different cities are experimenting with. And, it's either asking for something or trying to incentivize something. Yep. I think it's the good mixture of both, because both can push innovation, and that's the ecosystem. We are here thinking about innovation, and how we can solve these questions and make it exciting as well.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And to add to that, at sweet spot of regulation, I think it's a very nice question. I think most companies know that sustainability is there, that they need to do something with it. And what they dislike most is that we are unpredictable as governments. That we say, well, that's also sometimes the nature of politics. That there's a new election, but I think that's also the big problem, that we are not heading with the straight course, with a good direction, but that we are meandering. And that rules are changing, or rules are coming very suddenly, so that companies don't have the time to anticipate and that makes them also insecure to invest in money, capacity to school people in certain things. So, so I think in general it's a misconception from what we've spoken to quite a lot of companies as well, that companies hate to be regulated. They just want to be regulated in a proper way.
In their own favor. And maybe there's also one misconception where companies, individuals confuse and mix regulation and bureaucracy. I mean, that's also one thing, right? If regulation increases bureaucracy, nobody will like that, because that's more resources, more time, more effort. If regulation gives you that certainty, planning security, long-term horizon, strategic outlook, could be that kind of sweet spot. I know we had questions in the audience, Tatiana. Who are the volunteers? Over here, yes, please. So let's open up.
Hi. First of all, thank you all, especially Jordi. I really found your presentation very insightful and clear for this very complicated topic and all the complicated graphs we saw. First of all, I wanted to point something out that I found very interesting. Think back to this slide that we saw with the two circles that showed how much the material use rate of the individuals in Munich can go down when we make the 5 most impactful sectors circular. And the material use rate was still by a factor of 2 above what would we need to live within planetary boundaries. It was still somewhere at 28, I think, and planetary boundaries living within them would demand, I think it was something around 15. So I found that very remarkable and also a little bit frightening in a way. And then coming to my question, it's also for you, Jordi. You said, I think twice, that this low secondary material rate is due to the fact that there are so many primary materials coming into Munich and this high import rate. Why is that so? Is it because the recycling is expensive and is in competition with those cheap materials that are coming into the city? Or, yeah, what is that connection?
Well, my point is that, you know, the proportion of waste that a city generates compared to all the consumption that is happening in itself is already limited, right? You produce 10, kilograms of waste to 120 kilograms of consumption, because, you know, waste is just an output of a whole process of consumption of resources. So it will be limited. So my point was that circular economy is way more than just the cycling. It's very much about how you handle the resources in that system, to use them for a longer time, your phone, I see you wear glasses, whatever, as long as you can, rather than just looking, okay, how much I'm able to cycle. That's one part. But then, how can you reduce your footprint by, slowing the process, narrowing the process, and using more regenerative resources? Renewable energies is always the obvious example. So that was my point. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
But also very good analytical point. I mean, that's really interesting observation. Even with that significant reduction, we're still at a level that is beyond that one that we need to have for the planetary boundaries. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think also you mentioned in just a short sentence, and this is what is in the realm of influence of Munich. And I think that's also an important point, where you, for example, if steel that is imported here will be made with hydrogen in the future, that is not calculated in this number, right? Because it's coming from elsewhere where there can also be a more sustainable way of producing, right?
Exactly, these measurements or models, are really looking at what Munich can do. But then, as I was saying, it's a systemic way of thinking, right? So then if, there are interlinkages between Munich and other systems. So if we were to also look at that, of course, this impact could be larger. And indeed, that's a good point.
And maybe to add, the more we progress, then we see that kind of multiplier effects. So that's a systemic change, right? Something happens in some part of the world, in a specific industry, and that should ideally then add on in terms of positive impact. But of course, makes it even more complex to model. I mean, that's the next big step. How do you model all these external effects around you?
Yeah, good luck.
Eventually. We'll talk about that at the Circular Republic Festival in 2033. So we have 10 years to figure that out, but we have more questions in the audience. Yes. One second, the microphone is not working yet.
No.
Check.
Check.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for this report, because working for waste management for 30 years, we wanted to have a clue how the metabolism of Munich is. And now we have a hint. I think it's not 100% the right figure, but we have a hint how it's working. Perfect. Thank you very much. But my question is, first of all, we discuss a lot of regulation. We discuss a lot of things. What about benefit, communication of benefit? Because the people always want to have a benefit. If they go to the supermarket, there's something cheap, they buy it. If you buy 2, you get 3, or this is the benefit. And the problem is, what is the benefit of circular economy for the people, for the industry, and for all the things which is measurable? We talk about abstract things, about abstract advantages, all the things, but what is the concrete benefit? Because if you talk to the people with a concrete benefit, it would be more easier to get a circular economy running than talking about figures, graphs, maybe in the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Some people don't live in 30 years, maybe me. I hope, but I don't know. But this is the problem, I think. What is the concrete benefit we can communicate for circular economy?
Who wants to go for this? Yes, please.
There's a very nice Ellen MacArthur article from 1 year ago, and there the benefits are listed, and they are very immediate. And as I mentioned in one case, it goes from health benefits to facilitation of transport to better living conditions. I mean, of course, what we need to avoid is that we introduce measures that make life and living more expensive. I think that is obvious. That is one thing that we cannot afford. We cannot sell that. We cannot sell that to politicians. We cannot sell that to citizens. But I mean, one thing that we need to do is, first of all, address civil society as stakeholders in this process. That is fairly new. Only 2 days ago, I had to make an edit to a commission communication because, again, it was said, including all stakeholders, and of course they were only thinking of industry and civil society. I told them, no, we need to change that. We need to get this into our minds that we address civil society and civil society organizations and individuals as stakeholders, as part of the value chains also. So that is one thing. But we really should go to the Dell MacArthur article where all these points are listed. It is mobility, it is communal space, so it is communication. I mean, you have lots of lonely people, you have old people. I mean, these grassroots initiatives, they change that, they contribute to that. I don't know how to measure that, but it has a massive impact. Yeah. There's a whole list of these things, and they are immediate and easy to understand, really.
Maybe, Jordi?
Yes, Susanne, go.
No, yeah, just to add on to this, and I think this is, you know, when, you have this on the sort of like, writing about co-benefits is super important, making the co-benefits tangible. I think this is why it's so exciting to work on the city level now, because here we can't make life more expensive, we also can't make it more complicated, and sometimes if I'm standing in this little room where I'm collecting the waste, I'm just going crazy, and I'm doing this out of conviction, so I can totally understand if it's difficult to, you know, argue with other people that, you know, you have to sort everything. So it's more about, I think here in the city level, we have this huge opportunity, but maybe we have the duty as well to make it tangible. How does this life in a circular economy feel like, you know, living labs, Reallabore, whatever you may want to call it. We're super excited to have, you know, our Circular Republic Festival extending into Saturday and working here with the Kreativquartier and the people from Rehab Republic and Circular Munich, trying to show what this change, how does it feel like? And then I think next step that we have to take is, you know, it's this aspect, it's this aspect, and it's this aspect, and we have to weave this together into this sensation, this experience of what does my life look like if I'm becoming more circular. It's this comprehensive narrative, because at the moment we can only feel and see the snippets of what it's going to feel like.
I would like to ask you one thing. Who of you is angry regularly about the performance, about the battery life of your phones? Because that is something that drives me furious. And that is something that gets worse and worse, with every generation that, for example, Apple puts out, but it's the same for Samsung. It's probably for all phones. But that is circularity. That is product lifetime. That is an immediate benefit. That is about well-being, seriously. I mean, it's also about money, because after 2 or 3 years you buy a new phone, because you just cannot take that anymore, that you have to charge it after 10 hours every day. And the solution that they offer is that the charging is faster, that you stay in the hamster wheel, that you stick to the same brand and buy a new one. So, fake solutions, yeah.
Yeah, and if I may, and I think I will frame it in a way that I can pass it on to Arjan, because I like your question. And just when I entered and I saw that BMW Circular, you know, my families, they are all fans of BMW for some reason, and I was showing them a video, whatever, and they were all very happy. And, you know, that already is fostering creativity in a way, right? And these new business models that arise from it, that in itself is already a benefit, a very clear benefit, you know, creativity, new business models, new jobs, and new employment opportunities, which at Circular Economy we also model, and we try to connect to these insights when we have the occasion. And We actually did that in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Amsterdam, and really trying to see what are the benefits and the new employment opportunities that could be created by embracing circularity. And I think this is massive. It's huge. And I think in Amsterdam, concretely, they have been looking at that. So I think that these are two benefits that I see.
Yeah, Arjan, please go ahead. But I just wanted to be provocative. Maybe you can answer to that then as well. So we talked about the finance. I mean, this could be one, right? You feel it in your pocket. And maybe hypotheses, we're not there yet. It needs to be cheaper or at least not more expensive. Long way to go. Second one, the convenience part. And you explained, oh, something's more difficult. It cannot be inconvenient and much more inconvenient for all of us. It needs to be more convenient. And maybe the third dimension is also availability. Maybe it gives us availability because of resource scarcity that we will feel in many parts later on, or availability to better products, to better services. But these might be also the target scenarios where we have to go. All right, maybe your thoughts on this, and you also had some other thoughts in mind. I can see that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there's some. It can also be more sexy. It can, if it has like some kind of new, more hip, more new edge to it. But it has to be more convenient, not less convenient, not more. I think it's one of the most crucial questions. So I think it's a great question, and I think that's also where innovation really comes into place. Like we have to design new services or products that are. I mean, in Amsterdam we have the swap bike. I don't know if it's here, but half of the young people is driving the swap bike. You pay, you have a subscription on your bike, and when it's broken or stolen, they fix it immediately for you. So yeah, you have a working sharing model there. You can say Spotify. It's a digitization of music. Now we don't have to press billions of CDs and plastic covers anymore. So you could say that's also a circular invention in some way. So all these kind of, I think, if you make it better, it needs to be better, and that's like the direct benefits, and then the secondary benefits. In the Netherlands, we're now, for example, also experimenting with broad welfare, like broad prosperity, and that's when you keep the focus, pull the focus a little bit away from materialism, and look at other values. There can be a lot of joy in life as well. Trying to operationalize that.
Maybe one more quick comment to add. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the next report should be a circular benefit report, I think. Yeah?
So, any volunteers? No volunteers for the circular benefit report.
That's a great idea.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Another one, Susanne, I'm looking at you. There's another one. No, but I think it's good. I think this is also a good final impulse, I would say, for our panel. We've looked into the Circularity Gap Report, global level, now dig deeper into Munich, shared some insights, compared it with different cities, go a little bit more into the intervention direction. Now we have a good basis for more informed decisions. Now we need to go more into the benefits and work on that. So at this point in time, I would say thank you very much to the panelists for all the insights. Thank you very much, Jordi, Arjan, Susanne, and Hans Christian. Big applause to all of you, and to you for the great questions.